Hello, this is Karen McLaren, and I will be doing a PowerPoint over chapters 3 and 4 in our book, Educational Administration Theory, Research, and Practice. I want to start out by identifying a quote that I found really interesting by Henry Mitzenberg, and it was in the start of chapter 3, and it stated, "Every organized human activity, from the making of pots to the placing of a man on the moon, gives rise to two fundamentals and opposing requirements: the division of labor into various tasks to be performed, and the coordination of these tasks to accomplish the activity." We're going to start out talking about Max Weber. He was a German sociologist that coined bureaucracy theory. Bureaucracy refers to complex organization assigned to perform specific tasks. For Weber, bureaucracy was an ideal type or rule based on a system of rational rules as opposed to either tradition or charisma. Here we see the principles of the bureaucratic theory. At the top, we have the authority hierarchy. Underneath that, the formal rules and regulations, then divisions of labor, career orientation, impersonality, and formal selection process. We know that Weber's theory is ideal, but we have to ask ourselves, is it really realistic in an everyday setting? Well, there was some basic tendencies of actual organizations, and that was division of labor, impersonality, hierarchy of authority, rules and regulations, and career orientation. We know that with this model, we see that there's functions and dysfunctions. And we will break down the chart here. The characteristic that we're going to talk about right now is the hierarchy of authority. Well, the function here is the disciplined compliance and coordination, but the dysfunction is the lack of communication. There's communication errors and there's blocks, so the communication doesn't get from one to another. And then we see the division of labor. You get the function as the expertise, but the dysfunction would be boredom. Career orientation is another characteristic. The function would be an incentive, but the dysfunction would be an achievement and senior position in conflict. And then another characteristic would be rules and regulations, and that's a continuancy and it's ununiformed. And the dysfunction is it's rigid and it's goal displacement. And then the next characteristic we see is impersonal, and the function is it's more rational, but the dysfunction here is there's a lack of morale. With informal organization, it is a system of interpersonal relations that form spontaneously within a formal organization. And then we have a really good example that I wanted to share with you out of our book in chapter 3. You see the formal system and then the informal system here in this example. We have a dual structure of the bureaucratic model, internal contradictions among certain bureaucratic principles of organizations. Well, all the characteristics of this ideal type are logically consistent, and they interact for maximum organizational efficiency. However, both theoretical and empirical analysis indicate that things are not so smooth and integrate in the real world of organizational functioning. And that came out of our book. There are some criticisms or disadvantages, if you will, of the bureaucratic model. One is the dual structure. This is the guiding practice of the bureaucratic model, and it's also authority-based. And then we have feminist, and this is where they feel like all the roles are going specifically to the male gender. For instance, all the top positions will go to a male. There'll be a lack of equal access to training programs, etc. There were 6 central characteristics of the bureaucratic structure that Hall focused on, and they're listed there. Number 1 was the hierarchy of authority. Number 2, the specialization. Number 3, the rules of the incumbents. Number 4, procedures, specifications. Number 5, impersonality. Number 6, technical competence. As you can see, we have the 3 formal structures in school: the authoritarian, the professional, and the chaotic. I found this chart in chapter 3 that I wanted to share with you, and it talks about the 2 types of school structure: the enabling and the hindering. Here we see Mensenberg's 5 basic elements of structure. You've got the strategic, the techno-structure, the middle line, the support staff, and the operating core. So now we're going to get a little bit more in depth into the key parts. And you have your operating core, and that comprises those who perform the basic work. Then the strategic apex, and that consists of the top administrators who are in charge with responsibility of ensuring that the organization is effectively ran and it serves its mission. Number 3, we've got the middle line, and that's where the administration that connects the apex with the operating core through formal authority structure takes place. Number 4, you've got your techno structure, and this is where the administrative component charged with the responsibility of planning. And then number 5, you've got your support staff, and that is comprised of specialized units that exist to provide support for the organization outside the operating workflow. So that was a quick summary of chapter 3. Now we're going to dive right into chapter 4, and we're going to talk about the individuals in schools and the motivation. So when we talk about motivation, needs automatically come to my mind. And when I hear needs, I think of Maslow. And as you can see, here is the example of his hierarchy of needs. With Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we see that they are arranged by prepotency or the urgency. So now we're going to talk about Herzenberg's theory, and it explains the needs of workers in terms of extrinsic factors called hygienes and intrinsic factors called motivators. And this is a theory that suggests that job satisfaction and dissatisfaction are not opposite, but 2 separate entities or dimensions. And this is just another example that the book gave us that I really liked. And this table talks about the motivation hygiene theory. Your hygienes, you've got the interpersonal relations with subordinates, and the motivators there would be the achievement. And then you've got the interpersonal relation with peers, and that would be recognition. And the supervision would be technical, and that would be work itself. And then you got policy and administration, that would be responsibility, and working conditions would be advancement, and so on. Now we're going to talk about David Clarence McClelland, and he was an American psychologist noted for his work on motivation need theory, and he talked about 3 characteristics that would help us to motivate our needs. And that was number 1, the strong desire to assume personal responsibility for performance, a task to solve a problem. Number 2 would be those with high achievement needs. They tend to set moderately difficult goals and to take intermediate levels of risk. And number 3, you've got people with high achievement needs that have a strong desire for performance and feedback. we're going to talk about the need for autonomy, and this is the need for autonomy or self-determination, that desire to have a choice in what we do and how we do it. And the need for autonomy and self-determination can be enhanced by encouraging individuals to do the following. Number one, make their own choices. Number two, plan their own course of action. And number three, accept responsibility for the consequences of their own choices. Now we're going to talk about beliefs and attribution theory. Well, belief is something general and it's understood or it's generalized about the world. And an attribution theory deals with casual explanations that individuals make about past behaviors that are exceptionally in regard to achievement, efforts, and expectations. Now we're going to discuss the dimensions of causality. That is the locus, and that defines the location of the cause. Stability, that designates causes as constant or varying over time. And responsibility, and that refers to personal responsibility. That is whether the person can control the cause. Now we're going to talk about the beliefs about ability. You've got the stable view of ability, and that assumes that ability is a stable and uncontrollable trait, and this is a characteristic that cannot be changed, whereas you've got the incremental view of ability, and that assumes that the ability is unstable and uncontrollable. Now we're going to talk about the beliefs about fairness. We have the equity theory, and that focuses on the perceived fairness. It explains that if the input-output ratios are the same as the others with whom we are comparing ourselves with, then we view our treatment as being fair. But if we have the inequality, and that interferes with work motivation and individuals' attempts to reduce such feelings in three ways. They try to increase their outcome, they try to leave, or they try to reduce their input. There are three issues to consider, and that's individual judgment about fairness. Is it subjective? Number two, individuals are more sensitive to receiving less than they deserve. And number three, the equity and justice are important motivating forces to many individuals. Now we're going to talk about Victor Vroom and his expectancy theory, also known as ET. Victor Vroom dealt with motivating and management. Vroom's theory assumed that behavior results from conscious choices among alternatives whose purpose it is to maximize pleasure and minimize the pain. Together with Edward Lawler and Lyman Porter, Vroom suggested that the relationship between people's behavior at work and their goals was not as simple as it was first imagined by other scientists. So Vroom realized that an employee's performance is based on an individual's factors, such as the personality, the skills, the knowledge, the experience, and the abilities. The theory says that individuals have different sets of goals that can be motivated if they believe that, and they are as follows. There is a positive correlation between efforts and performance. Number two, favorable performance will result in a desirable reward. Number three, the reward will satisfy an important need. And number four, the desire to satisfy the need is strong enough to make the efforts worthwhile. Now we're going to talk about goals. A goal is the object of results being sought and varies from specific to abstract. And then you've got goal intensity. Well, that's the commitment to the goal, the degree to which the individuals consider its importance. Here we're going to talk about goal-setting theory, and the goal theory suggests that challenging but attainable goals can and often do increase motivation because such goals lead to increased focus. You've got your goals, focus attention. They help mobilize efforts. They enhance persistency, and they promote the development of strategies for success. Here are two good examples of figures that I've seen in Chapter 4 that I wanted to share with you and reiterate. At the top, you have figure 4.8, and that is a goal-setting theory example. At the bottom, you have figure 4.9, and this is a simplified model of work motivation. Now we're going to talk about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is the natural tendency to seek and accept challenges, where extrinsic motivation, in contrast, is based on rewards or punishment. And the key difference between the two is the individual's reasons for acting. So that wraps up Chapter 4 rather quickly, and I want to say thank you for taking the time to watch this PowerPoint, and I hope that the information can be beneficial.